Shabbat Shalom. It's wonderful to be with you again. Cantor Kleinman and I are so happy that you've chosen to join one of our many live streams on our different streaming platforms. Welcome to our living rooms. Welcome to Shabbat. And welcome to the special Shabbat that falls on the calendar closest to days of significance for the Jewish people. This past Monday night and Tuesday, we commemorated Yom HaZikaron L'Chayalei Tzava, Israel's day of memorial for its fallen soldiers and victims of terror. And then when the sun set on Tuesday and into Wednesday, we celebrated Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Day of Independence. And so we link in our Jewish calendar observance memory and hope, sacrifice and freedom, longing and joy. And those themes will inform our entire worship tonight. Both the visuals, we have a little bit of Israel flavor to our service. We hope that you'll feel warmly invited to join along. Before we light our Shabbat candles, we hope you'll take a moment, and if you are quarantined at home with a special someone or someones, why don't you greet those members of your innermost circle, wish those people Shabbat Shalom, even as we wish you Shabbat Shalom. So we're going to bring a little bit of light into our spaces, each in our own homes and places where we now find ourselves. I know many people have actually moved in with other family members to ride out the most difficult part of the social distancing restrictions during this pandemic. Let us kindle this flame as a symbol of hope in a time of distress. Oops. My matches don't want to cooperate tonight. So you can take your time if you're lighting Shabbat candles and do this with me. Make me feel a little bit better. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We will welcome Shabbat this evening with some special Israeli melodies in celebration of Yom HaAtzmaut. We'll be highlighting the music of some of Israel's progressive prayer communities. Tonight, we'll be hearing the music of Nava Tehillah and of the congregation Kol HaNeshama, both based in Jerusalem. These are congregations and prayer groups that have brought us not only beautiful music, but also spaces where all Jews, including Reform Jews, can feel comfortable and free to pray in Israel. And so these are groups that now more than ever continue to need our support. We'll begin with words from Psalm 98, Zamru Ladonai Bechinor, Bechinor, Vikol Zimra, words by Nava Tehillah. We continue to welcome Shabbat with the words of Shalom Aleichem, this melody also by Nava Tehillah. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharei, Malachei Elyon, shalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, malachei haShalom, malachei elyon. Bimelech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem leShalom, malachei haShalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll continue now with the words of Lecha Dodi, a special melody by the Jerusalem-based congregation Kol HaNeshama. We'll sing together verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. Before we sing the final verse, you might wish to rise, to turn and face the door of your home to greet the Shabbat bride.
Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad
stay standing as we continue with the Baruchu, our call to prayer. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
And so as we prepare for the watchword of our tradition, Shema, we're invited into the way the mystics of the Jewish tradition understood the words that we are about to sing. Shema Yisrael, listen, O Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, the Eternal One, our God, Adonai Echad. Not only is God one, unique in all the created world, but so too God is the one, the unity of all. Some religious traditions suggest that in order to account for the light side and the shadow side of life, we must look to two different kinds of gods, a God of light and a God of darkness, a God of good and a God of evil, a God of joy and a God of sorrow. The Jewish tradition is radically monotheistic in its suggestion that all experience, all matter is actually just one and the same expression of the one living God. And so Judaism often finds itself in a position to embrace paradox, that ours is a tradition that embraces not only the joyful, happy peak moments of life, the ones that are filled with light, but also the difficult passages, the ones that are filled with shadow and sorrow, such as the moment that we are all enduring together now. That embrace of paradox is felt throughout our calendar of Jewish observances. Earlier this week, I mentioned we linked Yom HaZikaron, one of the saddest days on the Jewish calendar, Israel's Memorial Day, where we as a Jewish people commemorate the tens of thousands who laid down their lives in sacrificial service so that Israel could be a free Jewish state today, and also those many innocent victims of terror and war who have died in the course of defending Jewish freedom. And that holiday goes back to back with Yom HaAtzmaut, a time of unadulterated joy. In any year other than this, when Israelis are just as much quarantined as we are because of the pandemic, you'd see on Yom HaAtzmaut Israelis flooding the streets, clobbering each other with inflatable hammers and shooting silly string at one another in this kind of wild and abandon and reverie. This week's Torah portion is also an embrace of paradox because it's a double portion, the first part of which is called Acharei Mot, which means in the face of calamity or after death, and the second part of which is called Kiddoshim, which means holiness or wholeness, after calamity, wholeness and holiness. And so we find a way to embrace all of these paradoxes in their totality. The joy and the sorrow, the light and the dark, the happy and the sad, the bereavement and the hope. They all seem to resonate especially now. I invite us, if it is your custom to remain standing for Shema, to do so as we offer these words together. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. If you're standing, you may be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'aderech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. So on this week that commemorated Yom HaZikaron and celebrated Yom HaAtzmaut, let's join together in singing the original Israelite freedom song, Mi Chamocha. Lai 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 la lai la 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 lai 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 la lai la 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 lai 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 la lai la 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 lai lai la lai la lai la 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 la. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nechar b'kodesh, nora tehiloto sefele, nora tehiloto sefele. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע הים לפני משה ומרים. זה אלינו ואמרו, זה אלינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם. ונאמר, כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
We sing together now these words that conclude the Hashkivenu, this prayer that we recite each evening, asking God to spread a Sukkot Shalom, a shelter of peace over us. And this final line of the prayer asks for God to spread that shelter of peace upon us, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, upon all of the people Israel, ve'al Yerushalayim, and upon our Jewish people's holiest city, Jerusalem. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim shalom. Ve'al Shalom. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi agid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. We take a few moments now to pray silently. If you're following along in a prayer book, you may wish to continue with the traditional words of the Amidah, or you can just take this as an opportunity to wind down from the week that is ending and to take some time with your own thoughts and your own reflections. We continue silently.
So once again, let me wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Of course, it seems like a lifetime ago that I was last in Israel. It was really only a little over a year ago with our senior class trip to Israel. We can't wait to take more high schoolers back to Israel in time to come when it becomes imaginable once again to travel with groups. In the meantime, we've found a way for this week to connect to Israel through a very, very dear friend of our Westchester Reform Temple community. His name is Uri Feinberg, and he is an extraordinary Jewish educator in the field. He is a guide, but perhaps the word guide, if you've ever worked with a tour guide before, does not convey the full intellectual credentials and training that Israelis who want to be guides in Israel must go through in order to attain that title and distinction. In 2011, I was scheduled to lead a family trip to Israel over the December break. And then right around Halloween, I managed to slip on some ice and fracture my right ankle. And I was in a cast, unable to walk for the better part of 8 weeks. It became quickly apparent that I would not be hiking up Masada and strolling with our group through Jerusalem and taking this wonderful trip that we had been planning for over a year. My colleague, who was working at WRT at the time as our cantor rabbi, or crabbi, Dan Sklar, quickly jumped into the pole position. And we conferred with Rabbi Sklar and Rabbi Jacobs, and we agreed that we needed an all-star tour educator, a guide who would be the Michael Jordan of guides. And so we were connected to Uri Feinberg, and thus began a very special friendship. Uri has been on a number of subsequent WRT trips to Israel, most recently one of the guides on the trip of 60 congregants that Rabbi Reeser led this past December. We hope that a number of you Uri fans are out there in your homes and different places watching tonight, because it's going to be a very special treat for me to introduce and reintroduce our friend, our educator, Uri Feinberg.
WRT, it is great to see you. I remember the first time we worked together, Rabbi Blake, you might remember, you slipped on some black ice and weren't able to go ahead and lead the Israel trip because of your broken leg. It was the first time that we interacted, and it was incredible. And how many times have we been together since, either here in Israel or in your home in Westchester? Now, where I'm standing right now is about 500 meters from where I live here in the city of Modi'in. It's 500 meters because recently they've lifted some of the restrictions and have allowed us now, because of the coronavirus, to actually extend the distance from our homes where we do exercise to 500 meters. And where I'm standing, this ancient synagogue is dated to about 2,300 years ago, to the days of when the Hasmoneans were here in these hills where we are now, and they fought against the Greeks. When the Greeks tried to outlaw Judaism, they said, no, not on our watch. Mattathias, Judah, and the gang, well, you know the story. This synagogue is not why I'm talking to you right now, nor is actually the hills that you can see in the distance, the Judean mountains, just over which is the city of Jerusalem. But rather to identify that we are right now in the midst of, well, a parallel high holy days that we have here in Israel. Of course, the high holy days that are celebrated in Tishrei and around September. These days now with Holocaust and Heroism Memorial Day and Memorial Day for fallen soldiers and those who were killed in terrorist acts, and of course Independence Day, are all joined together. Now clearly, like we have around the world, here in Israel we are facing many challenges these days. And the pain that people are feeling and the confusion that people are feeling around the world, well, we're going through it as well. These days, however, I think to a certain degree that feeling is elevated. And I have to tell you that I clearly understand that we are not perfect here in Israel, but I also know how much there is to be proud of what we've accomplished here. And I also know that as we speak, we all have young people in our lives, our sons and our daughters and our nieces and our nephews, who are right now on our front lines, ensuring that, well, that we're safe. There's real power in that. And there's real power in the commemoration that we all feel when we come together on a day like Memorial Day. And that pain that we feel isn't just there for one day only, but every day is a Memorial Day, especially if you are family and you are a loved one of someone who's fallen. And yet, as that day ends, as the sun sets, literally and figuratively, on Memorial Day, Independence Day begins. And just as there is that communal connection that we all feel in sadness, there is also in the joy and the celebration and the pride. And there's real power in that. Even as we're going through these questions of how do we interact? Do we wear our mask? Do we not wear a mask? Of course, we should wear a mask. And I have mine right here, so don't worry. How should we physically distance ourselves? And I got to tell you, for Israelis to learn how to stand in line, well, that's an accomplishment in and of itself. But as we go through these questions of how do we create new social norms, how do we create a new reality for ourselves given the new normal that has been thrust upon all of us around the world, every single year we find ourselves in these high holy days. And we have to, well, once again come together. And during the year, those of you who have been here and those of you who know Israel know that we don't always come together. And, well, there's power. There's power in these days of sadness, and there's power in these days of joy. You know, I wanted to leave you with two things, actually. First of all, to make it very clear, Independence Day is almost upon us, and, well, this flag I know means so much to all of you, and, well, as you can imagine, means a lot to me as well. But I also want to share with you that, well, I also have something else that's really important to see, and that is that my heart is actually in two different places. Now, hopefully you can see that. Yeah? My little helmet here, New York Mets. We have very close family. My wife's family, Meryl's family, lives in Brooklyn, lives in New York, lives in Manhattan, also in New Jersey, by the way, and other places. As we speak, one of Meryl's sisters is a nurse in Brooklyn, and she has a nephew who is an EMT on an ambulance in Manhattan. So crazy enough, my oldest daughter, who right now is on the border with Gaza as part of her unit in the Iron Dome, I find myself more concerned with our family in New York. It's crazy. And yet that's the reality. But I'd like to perhaps leave you with some words that aren't my own words. These are the words of Yehuda Amichai. And I'm sure there's many of you who have heard of Yehuda Amichai, and if you haven't yet, really, I would say the poet laureate of Jerusalem. This is what he writes in his poem, Love of the Land. The land is divided into sections of memory and of hope. Its inhabitants mingle with one another as they do when returning from a wedding or a funeral. And the land is not divided into war and peace zones, and he who digs a trench to lie in during the times of war will return and lie in the trench with his beloved at times of peace. If he lives until peace returns, that is. And the land is beautiful, decorated by the surrounding enemies as well, in armor which shines and sparkles like the sun, like a shimmering necklace on a person's neck. And the land is its own package, and she is tied well with everything within, and she is tied tightly, and the strings sometimes hurt. And the land is very small, and I can contain her within me. The currents of the land sweeps over me as well as I rest, and the heights of the Kinneret is always on my mind. And thus I can feel her with my eyes shut, the sea valleys and the mountains, and I am able to remember all that happened within her, all at once, as a man whose life flashes before him in the time of his death. Now, clearly, we have this connection, this physical connection. But at a time like this, regardless of where you live, whether it's here in Modi'in, here in Israel, in the state of Israel, or it's where you live in your community, now each of you in your homes, but of course glued together by the wonderful Westchester Reform Temple that you belong to and your wonderful leadership. I think there's real power also in the fact that regardless of where we are, we have this connection. Me and you and me, and of course here in the state of Israel. I hope you have powerful moments together. Clearly you share sad moments together and painful moments, But hopefully with that, we also are able to, well, enjoy the joy together as well. Chag Sameach, everyone. Have a wonderful Independence Day, and continue to be safe and to hug each other, and until we meet again in person. Bye. WRT, it is great.
So even as Yehudi Amichai, whose beautiful poetry Uri quoted, is the poet laureate of Jerusalem, so too it could be said that the late wonderful singer, songwriter, composer Nomi Shemer was the songwriter laureate of Jerusalem. It was she who composed and won a contest with her stirring anthem, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold. And in this anthem, called Al Kol Ele, which means for all these things, Shemer embraces the melody and the poetry of paradox, declaring that to be in relationship with Israel is to embrace both the bee and its sting and also its honey, sorrow and sweetness, memory and hope, light and dark, all bound up together.
Al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok, al biteinu hatinoket shmorei li hatov, al ha'esh hamevoeret, al hamayim hazakim, al ha'ish hashav habayta min hamerchakim, al kol ele. נרשמות עכשיו, אנא שמור לי על כל אלה ועל אהובי נפשי, על השקט, על הבכי ועל זה השיר, על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי הטוב, על
And so for the sweetness of love and also for the sting of love compromised by illness, we now pray for healing. We know that there is not a household in our WRT community that has not been affected, deeply affected by the current pandemic. Every single one of us knows at least one person who has taken ill, please God, recovered, others who have been sent to the hospital, people who have had brushes with their own mortality. And our community is reeling from the number of bereavements that we are now carrying collectively. Let's take all of that hurt and find a way to make it sing through our prayer. If you would like to share aloud in your own homes the names of loved ones for a prayer of healing, please feel invited to do so at this time, or you can always share those names quietly. Please also extend your prayers to those who, though nameless to us, are struggling to fight against this dread disease. Tonight, our community is also collectively praying for Marco Fernandez, Lawrence Smith, Nicole Shusey, Ray Josel, Rivka Batsura, Amelia Austin, Leah Greenspan, Aviva Tzila Bat Esther Bela, Dan Sokolov, Jeffrey Millman, Chava Batsara, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Fredel, Sheila Fried, Tanya Romanoff, Yitzchak Yona Ben May, Yaakov Hirsch Ben Rachel, Malkat Sipora Bas Rachel, Tamar Bat Malka, Avram Ben Miriam, David Tremsky, and Heschel Meir Ben Davida Chana. Let all of them feel the strength of our love and our prayers tonight as you follow with us and we offer together this prayer of healing. Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. If you are able and would like, please rise as we join in Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. This time we would like to invite those who are in a period of mourning or observing a yahrzeit to be acknowledged and stand in the following order. If you are within the first 7 days of having laid to rest your loved one, would you please rise where you are? Will those who are within 30 days of remembrance please feel invited to rise? If you are within a first year of memorial, please rise. And if you are observing a yahrzeit on this Shabbat, please rise. And each of us in our own way, in our own place, now stands with you as we hear the names of those taken in recent days and those the anniversary of whose death we commemorate on this Shabbat. The entire Westchester Reform Temple family joins our Rabbi Emeritus and President of the Union of Reform Judaism, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, in mourning the death of his mother, Suki Jacobs. We also remember Jeffrey Escher, husband of Monique Escher and father of Max and Sam Escher, memorialized earlier this morning. Maxine Myers, sister of Margie Miller and aunt of Bob Miller. Philip Dworetsky, father of Vicky Elkins. Joan Mark, mother of John Geverts. Donald Sharoff, husband of Marilyn Sharoff and father of Leslie Dubner and Gary Sharoff. Howard J. Dugoff, father of Julie Waxman. Stephen Cohen, uncle of Robert Mitchell. William Mantell, uncle of Jordan Barrow. Daniel Kestenbaum, father of Robert Kestenbaum. Paul Corrins, uncle of Janet Corrins and cousin of Bruce Steinberg. Dorothy Sarrett, mother of Linda Sarrett. Ken Safian, husband of Naomi Gross. Erica Cohen, aunt of Kate Levy. Ann Bernstein, mother of Diane Loft. Joel Willis, uncle of Wendy Burke. Robert Bader, father of Lynn Pillette. Yvonne Marks, mother of Aaron Marks. Henry Graff, father of Iris Morse and grandfather of Betsy Rothbart. Gary Greenfield, uncle of Andrew Levine. Jane Nussbaum, wife of Lawrence Nussbaum, mother of Barbara Nussbaum, Lynn Scott, and Larry Nussbaum. Anita File, mother of Allison File Green. Gerald Rubin, father of Neil Rubin and Stuart Rubin. Carl Weber, father of Corey Weber. Almost incomprehensibly, all of them taken in the last 4 weeks. We also commemorate on their Yahrzeit Faye Berman, Arthur Belfer, Morris Beller, Michael Bergman, Jeanette Blutenthal, Mitchell Brucker, Larry Bucksbaum, Betty Citron, Brian Cohen, Charles Cohen, Jack Cohen, Bessie Eisert, Harry Fields, Bennett Lowenstein Fishman, Evelyn Frank, John Frankel, Barry Fryman, Maurice Friedman, Jetta Goldberg, Charles Herman, Isabel Goldschlag, John Rothenberg, Alice P. Goldsmith, Vivian Goldsmith, Dorothy Goldstein, Louis S. Granitor, Louis Wolowitz, Shirley Greenfield, Cecily Gutter, David Jaffe, Emmanuel L. Capel, Lillian Kerner, Carl Nispel, Pearl Koch, Martin Krebs, Mildred Lakow, Ralph Lupin, Ann R. Miller, Sidney G. Rosenthal, Ruth Reynolds, Michael Roquito, Samuel Ruboy, Harry Shapiro, Ruth Shapiro, Beatrice Cedar, Ethel Schmerler, Irving Simon, Stuart Sunnis, Bernard Chorney, Sylvia Weberman, and Samuel Werber. We also acknowledge the more than 60,000 American deaths due to COVID-19, and we also are memorializing the tens of thousands of those human beings who gave their lives for the Jewish state on this week that has commemorated Yom HaZikaron L'Chayalei Tzeva. We join together in the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, B'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalau v'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam alamei almaya, Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yithalal Shemei d'kudusha brichu, Le'ela minkol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlam rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'asei shalom, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. V'imru, v'imru amen, v'imru amen. Just a few brief announcements. We continue Shabbat tomorrow morning with Torah study at 10 a.m. There's a Zoom link available through the calendar listing on the homepage of our temple website, WRtemple.org. And we hope that you'll join us from 10 to 11 for some intriguing study on the important themes and motifs of our portion this week, which is a double portion, Acharei Mot Kedoshim. Please stay tuned to your weekly electronic newsletter, our e-blast, as well as to the temple website, where you can find listings and Zoom links so that you can join online for all of the amazing, inspiring, enriching content that WRT is offering during the weeks when our building is closed, but our hearts and our brains and our Jewish souls are wide open. We're going to ask that you find wherever you are most comfortable. If standing is how you would like to conclude our service with us, we'd be honored to know that you're standing as together we offer Hatikva.
Nefesh Yehudit Omiyah Ulpate Mizrach Kadima Ayin Letzion Sophia Od Loftot Tikvatenu Atikva Bachnod Alpaim Liotam Chofshi Be'arteinu Eretz Sion Yerushalayim Liotam Chofshi Be'arteinu Eretz Sion Yerushalayim.
Please join me now in Kiddush. If you have your own Kiddush cup, you can feel free to join together with me.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava u'vraton hinchilanu zikaron le'maaseh v'reishit hiu yom techilah le'mikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim Ivanu v'harta Yotanu kidasha mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvrason hinchatanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Shabbat
L'chaim. And we'll conclude our service this evening by reciting the Motzi together. Well, it is our custom at WRT to braid our arms around one another like the braided challah, and we're unable to do that today, but we certainly feel the bonds and the strength of this community. And so we join together in the words of Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Cantor.
Shabbat Shalom. Yasher koach.
Shekochech to you and to our whole community. Shabbat Shalom.